Now I have a gavel instead of using my knuckle on the desk. Do you have a preference, Commissioner Treese?
All right,
Just don't hit your screen.
We are ready to go, Madam Chair.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, July 27th work session of the Washington County Board of Commissioners. This is Chair Catherine Harrington, and with me this afternoon, we have Commissioners Pam Treese, Commissioner Nafis Safai, Commissioner Roy Rogers, and Commissioner Willie. The next item on our agenda is board and leadership communication. So, who on the board would like to go first? Not Jerry, not Commissioner Willie, I mean. Go ahead, Commissioner Treese. Hope you're on mute, I think.
I took myself off. I can go first here. Tomorrow night is MPAC meeting, and I wanted to let all of you know that Metro is going to be doing a presentation on the SHS, and a piece of it's going to be around tax collection, but they'll also be doing they'll be providing other information, and there will be a legislative update. Megan has looked into the agenda for me, and Chris Deffelbaugh has done a really good job of providing information for me regarding the meeting. If you have anything that you'd like me to share, please let me know. Otherwise, I will come back next week with a report. Couple other things I wanted to mention. Number one is that yesterday we had a meeting with HBA, with Susan Mates and Fran Warren and Joanne Delmonico. The meeting was with a fellow from Noise Development, Ryan McInster from HBA, and Dave Nielsen. And the objective of the meeting was really to introduce these group of constituents to HBA and talk about what's happening in the world of development in relationship to sustainability. It was a good discussion. They wanted to continue the discussion into the future, so we will be doing that as well. On Wednesday of last week, it was the ERMDAC meeting. The majority of the time was spent talking about pedestrian and biking improvement candidates for the selection to be funded in the fiscal year 22-23 and 23-24. There's a lot of projects on the list. It's a 150 list, and I heard about lots of these from different constituents in the district that I represent and also in District 1. I can just continue to provide you updates on what's happening there. This Friday is the next Preschool for All Task Force meeting, and I'll be attending that along with the chair. So that's my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Treese. Who's next?
I can go next.
Okay.
Before Commissioner Willie assigns me. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Chair. And it's good to be here. In terms of my updates, my office had a great successful civic engagement training last week. And I want to thank my new staff member, Brenda Barlett. That was her third day of doing the civic engagement into the workforce, and she did a great job. So thank you, Brenda. And I also want to extend my gratitude to the Governor, Kate Brown. She was able to come and she was able to take live questions and really engaged, and was really appreciative of the training. I've been working on my appointees for the Planning Commission. So I've been busy with connecting with the applicants. And then last week, I really appreciated the roundtable discussions and retreat or could I categorize as a retreat? I think it was my first time being in-person meeting, so I think my brain registered as a retreat kind of, but I really enjoyed it. It was a really great conversation and something that I really needed to hear from all of you. So thank you. That concludes my update.
It's kind of a sad situation that thanks to a pandemic, meeting face to face is a big occurrence now. It's like, oh, bummer. Used to be routine. Anyway, Commissioner Willie, how about you?
Well, yeah, just to follow on that same conversation, I went and got a haircut today. I've been with this same person for...
Which one?
Hey, there's a couple of them up there. And I've been with this person for, I don't know, over a year, but today was the first day I'd ever seen her without a mask on. And I went, hey, I've never seen your face before. So yeah, it's interesting. The new revelations we get, I guess, through this whole transition out of the pandemic. So yeah, last week I was able to go to the Greater Portland Inc. Board of Directors. They talked about the CIDS, which is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy for the region. And then, of course, they had lots of conversation about new business opportunities, and primarily opportunities to enhance the attractiveness of downtown Portland and some of the things that they are working on. So that was a good meeting. Also on Friday, of course, we had the ARPA meeting, and I'll let the chair update us on that. She and I attended that at the same time. This morning was again Chamber Board of Directors meeting, and they talked about some of the programs that they are recruiting and encouraging right now, and again working with their businesses to make the next transition. And certainly employment was one of the primary issues and I think all of our employers are dealing with that. So coming events, tomorrow's a discussion with North Plains on their economic opportunity analysis as they continue to do a plan for where they want to have industry and commercial and where they want to have additional housing. And so this is all part of the process that they have to go through to get approval to do that. So that'll be a really good conversation. I look forward to having those probably about once a quarter. And then on Thursday, I'm going to get a briefing on the Highway 47 homeless encampment as we continue to try and, at least I try and get more information about the homeless encampments and what we're doing about that. It's the number one question I get from constituents. I have met again with several individuals and some other electeds on the Econo Lodge and where we're going from there. So busy times, plenty of different things to deal with, but that's all I got.
How about you, Commissioner Rogers?
Sure, I can talk a bit. Last week, end of the week, had a couple of fun events. And one of them really not too county related, but there were 5 of us who got to lunch. For prior, 2 of them were chairs of Washington County and a couple of government relations people. We had all worked county a long time and just got together and spent about 4 minutes on county business and about an hour and a half just talking about trips that they're all taking. So that was that's always fun. I also spent a bit of time on Friday with the Habitat for Humanity and recommended a couple of things to them, which I hope was useful, and talked with Val. We all know Val, and had a couple of follow-ups with him. I Also had some fun talking to an old friend over lunch, John Cook. He's now in King City, but he was mayor of Tigard for a long time. And John and I and his family have known each other for 40 plus years. Into this week, I think it's all on the announcements, but I'm gonna have lunch tomorrow, in fact, with the a good mayor of Tualatin and city manager, and we'll do a little talk about their URA and a particular subject that's been dear to my heart since we put so much sweat and blood and effort into it, and that's Salt Creek Parkway. So that ought to be an interesting discussion. I have the preschool for all conversation this Thursday. Tricia is retiring. I know she's on the line. I can see her name. Friday, we have a fair board. And yesterday, I also had a nice conversation, County Auditor John Hutzler, and I told John he's looking for suggestions. I'm sure he'll get to all of you. And I told him in all of these years working together, he's never taken one of my suggestions. So we laughed about that a bit. And I said, I still have a couple of big legacy ones for you. And he listened politely, and we'll see if, what he does with all that. He also, to his credit, which I didn't expect, he said, well, I got some big projects. Well, what can you all do about a little bit of funding? And I said, well, that's always a budgetary question that we'll deal with then. But anyway, it was a nice conversation. So that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. Well, I'll start with an item that Commissioner Willie mentioned that I did not have on my list, so I'll need his help to make sure I represent this correctly. And that was he and I serving as board liaisons to the internal ARPA steering committee. And we spent time looking over staff proposals and ideas on community engagement and preparation of material for our upcoming work session with the team on August 10th. But continuing to follow through on the board's framework that you all gave approval for of the pursuing public health coverage and a little bit of the economic recovery work following your direction. So did I catch all that? Okay, phew. Whatever other good stuff is happening will be coming to us at a work session near you. So let's see, like Commissioner Willie, but I know that it's not unique to the two of us, just being responsive to requests to discuss homeless encampments and the Econo Lodge. On Friday afternoon, Governor Brown gave me a ring, and she's been following up with each of the chairs of all 36 counties to talk about two big things that are on her mind. One is all of the counties now have the authority to move forward on COVID and any community direction there. So she wants to make sure that every county knows that we got what we asked for, because the state is now out of the COVID management business, more or less. It's now in county hands, and given national activity from the CDC and FEMA and Governors Association, she wants to make sure that we're prepared. So true to form, well, I'll tell you about the next step in a second. The second topic was on rental assistance. There are funds that we're all aware of from the feds through to the states and then down through constituents in the counties by way of the Community Action Organization. So in our case, it's Community Action of Washington County. And there's been quite a backlog of applications for people who have applied to get that rental assistance. And so the state hired a application processing firm and worked through over 4,000 applications. We're one of the counties with the largest backlog. And she was putting in a call to ensure that we were taking proactive steps to help community action handle these applications. And so for both of those things, I got on the horn right away to our very own County Administrative Officer, Tanya Angie, and to Marnie Kyle. And so we had a short meeting early evening Friday, and then they're taking it from there. So as always, some good out of the box thinking going on, and Ms. Angie will report on further steps in just a few moments. The other more appreciable meeting that I had last week, in addition to constituent meetings, was the monthly chair mayors meeting, where I asked them about fireworks bans. Their preference is that we have a ban on the sale of fireworks devices all across the county. And they know through our voter approved charter that anything we do would only apply to the unincorporated areas. So the urban unincorporated areas and the rural areas. So as you've already heard from me, I'm scoping that out a little bit, doing some data collection before bringing an idea for your direction for us to then work with Ms. Angie and company. So early days yet. But while the issue is still top of mind, I wanted to chat with them about it. So let's see, and we're going to do the normal summer thing and take August off from that meeting. So no meeting coming up in August. So I haven't really looked forward on my calendar. So thank you, Commissioner Rogers, for reminding me that yes, I'll be joining you in that joint meeting with fair board members, given that the county fair is going on right now. I really enjoyed my time at the fair on Saturday. I hung out with the 4-H folks in the morning and early afternoon, took in the whole expo and walked through the food and just briefly through the carnival. Great folks taking advantage of the fair, and then went back later in the evening. I learned that a longtime fair booster and a longtime supervisor and mentor for the 4-H horse program, Inez Griffles, had died in January. So there was a short celebration for her family, who knew that she was very active with that and the history of the fairgrounds as well, but they weren't part of her contributing her time, her grace, and her expertise. So they got to hear a bit about that, which was really special. So that's it from me. I still can't believe it's the end of July and that August is at our doorstep. Yeah, Commissioner Willie, go ahead.
Hey, thanks for mentioning the fair. Once again, I forgot to do that, but yes, we are in the middle of our 10-day fair. And I would encourage everybody to take a little bit of time and go out there and do exactly what the chair did, to just kind of do a meet and greet, check out some of the 4-H stuff and the livestock we have. And if you're really brave, get on a carnival ride, and, you know, may the force be with you.
I won't. I get motion sick, everything. So
No, I'm taking my grandson out there, I think, on Friday. And yeah, he's going to get on those rides. I'm not. So anyway, yeah, spend some time out there.
I'm going to go back and visit on Sunday so I can see the smaller animals, but I better check the schedule on the website before I go too. So yeah. So cool. Great. Well, anything else, commissioners, before we move on over to leadership? No. All righty then. Ms. Angie, what have you got for us?
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Board of Commissioners. On a personal note, my family and I spent time at the fair on Sunday. I too get motion sickness, so I will not touch the rides. However, we spent dollars trying to win the carnival games. My daughter did win the ring toss, so we left with a giant stuffed dog as part of our family. I do want to just share for the benefit of the viewing public relative to the American Rescue Plan Act funds. There are two kind of key buttons on the front page, homepage of our website, one in English and one of Spanish, and that will provide the most up-to-date information on Washington County funds. And so that's just a resource for community members. The chair had brought up rental assistance. This is a partnership that Washington County is very focused on with Community Action Network. So after the conversation that the chair had with Marnie, Kyle and I, Marnie reached out directly to Jenny Proctor, and Jenny is working closely with Community Action. I'm hopeful that we can bring you an update to the board on the progress next week because we are focused on getting these funds out. I do want to share a data point that I learned from Jenny actually earlier this morning is there are $3 million going out the door directly to rental assistance in Washington County each month. So it is meeting a direct need. I would like to bring up a weather related update. Just as situational awareness, there is currently no wildfire activity in Washington County, and there are no, okay, I didn't know if that was a question at first. No, that's thumbs up. Yes, that is a thumbs up. There's no wildfire activity in Washington County, and there's no watches or warnings in the area. The wildfire risk should be minimal, normal for the next week. Last week, there was a question regarding the Game Hog Creek fire, which is located just north of Highway 6, just across the line into Tillamook County. This has been contained for about the last week and has a small team taking care of the final mop up. The fire was limited to 182 acres. We'll have a gradual warming trend over the course of the week, which will result in a moderate, not extreme, moderate heat wave. Wednesday, a high of 92, low of 62. Thursday, high of 95, low of 62, and similar temperatures Friday and Saturday as well. We are hearing that there are a few facilities that will be opening cooling centers. We don't anticipate at this point in time the county will need to open a cooling center since the governor's restrictions have ended. There should be more facilities throughout the county open. And of course, the wingspan's not easily accessible as well as because it is full of fair activity right now. Just for context, when we do have moderate to extreme temperature, our emergency management team does work very closely with our public health team to determine the number of cooling centers, and then we do take the information collected throughout the county and ensure that the community has access to those site locations. And that concludes my update. Chair?
I forgot to mention one thing. Commissioner Treese had mentioned that SHS will be covered at MPAC. On Monday, as usual, as your rep, I participated in the Metro SHS Oversight Committee meeting, and I neglected to send you all a memo from that, which is a good memo on the tax collections. So I'll try to do that before your meeting tonight, but either here or there, please know it's a good memo. But there was a bit of discussion about a letter that the Here Together Coalition had sent to the Oversight Committee about Clackamas County and their navigating through the funding disbursement challenge. Which we have done the bridge loan, as we all know, but they're very concerned about their continued leverage with regard to dealing with the aftermath of last September's wildfires and the need for recovery there, as well as the risk given this wildfire season, given that they have a much larger area of forest land in Clackamas County than we do. So they're needing to be a bit more conservative with regard to their reserve management because of that. So it just makes things a little complicated. I'm really pleased to report that I think there is a positive working relationship between Metro and Clackamas County staff on this. So I think it's important that we echo that. Our 3 counties continue to be aligned on following through on the measure as the voters approved, and our 3 teams working together on tool investments and processes so that we are working well together to deal with the regional challenges of homelessness. So that's all good news. So don't be fooled. There's a tremendous amount of really good work going on and no reasons for alarms, caution lights, red flags, or anything. So just wanted to make sure I did my part on that. Sorry to interrupt. I forgot to read my list. Sorry, Ms. Angie, you were all set, right? You were all done? Okay. Mr. Carr, how about you?
Good afternoon, Chair. No, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
All righty. Well, like Commissioner Fye, you had your first in-person meeting with us last week in our roundtable. So yes, it was
It's
an
delightful to be
advance,
in the
not a
room.
retreat. Sorry, I'm just poking fun. I hope it's coming across okay. Well, hello there, Ms. Taniguchi Dennis, CEO of Clean Water Services. What's happening in the world of water resource recovery?
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and good afternoon, Board of Clean Water Services. So we have some good news. Clean Water Services is back in stable operations. The chemical deliveries are coming in on time now. The team's working on deploying the additional training and policies for outdoor work and high temperatures. We needed to do some modifications. They adopted those really well. And we've had no additional positive COVID cases in 2 weeks now. So the team is very thankful for that, and they're back into normal operations. Dr. Ken Williamson and Blythe Layton, our technical team working on sewer surveillance. They're our science team, and they're working with Mark Jockers on a privy update to the board. They're finding significant uptrends in the data. I know it's not what we want to hear, but more COVID's being detected in the headworks at the treatment plants, and the Delta variant is being identified as present in the 30 to 40th percentile of the virus that's in the wastewater. So I hope it goes down, but we'll keep the board apprised. I know some of the city managers are interested in this data too, so we'll make it available, folks, so we can do some thoughtful pre-planning. Thank you. That's all I have.
I think what on that, and I'd invite my colleagues to provide comment too, is one thing that's been really helpful from your science team working in partnership with the Washington County Public Health team is, so what does that science mean, right? And to try and ensure that our public health team, your scientists, and OHA are pulling in the same direction. We're in Oregon, we've done a pretty good job compared to other states of vaccination, certainly not where we wanted to be at this point statewide. And Washington County, after the governor's call, I'll admit I had to relearn coronavirus.oregon.gov. I had forgotten, and I had to remind myself of the different risk levels. So I dove right into the OHA charts and graphs and looked at the vaccination rates across each of the counties. And we're at that top performance of the list, doing very well in terms of pushing hard with regard to the ethnic diversity availability as well. So our team's doing a marvelous job. So anyway, I just want to make sure that any information that we get through that Privy Council and that is provided to our public does have a good context for us non-sewer scientists and non-public health experts. That's all. Otherwise, our front office will be getting more phone calls than they know what to do with. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we just see the trends about 2 weeks earlier than what happens in the human cases. So it's just something to watch, and we'll certainly do that.
Okay, great. So before we move on to formal agenda discussion, we have a letter. Is Ms. Angie still with us, or did we lose her off the meeting?
We have lost her screen upstairs. We're
Okay.
looking into it.
Okay. Do we by any chance have Aaron Doyle in the participants list, in the attendees list, I mean? No, we don't. As far as I can tell, there's Aaron Calvert.
Hi, Chair Harrington. You promoted me right when you were asking the question. So you have that dead space of just waiting. So I'm not sure what the question was. Can I help?
Not a problem. So the board had received a letter from various state legislators about broadband investments. And Aaron Doyle served as our point person to pull together a team of folks for a response letter. And the plan had been for us to touch bases on that during work session today. So right now I'm madly looking at the attendee list to see if there's anybody else to promote. So
Aaron Doyle and the CEO is coming on, Chair.
Aaron is
oh,
here.
thank you, everyone. Hi there, Aaron. Hi there again, Miss Angie. So would now be a good time versus later to talk about the broadband letter? Great. I see head shaking. So commissioners, we were sent a draft letter from Ms. Doyle. Has anyone or everyone had a chance to take a look at that? Or can you just give me a thumbs up that you have it? Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually reading it right now. I had forgot to do that, so if you'll give me a minute here or something, I'll catch up.
Absolutely. And I don't want to detract from his reading of that. I have two things I want to ask about. Oh, but Commissioner Willie, you're all set. Is everybody else all set for discussion at this point?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, so the first thing I wanted to ask about, this is a fine, general response letter, speaks from fact and all of that. So thank you. But I was wondering, when I read the third paragraph in the last sentence, this requires us to work deliberately through a public process, da, 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 da. I was wondering, so you point them to our new ARPA page, which I really like. I appreciate it. I was wondering, should we include here just a summary from our June estimate that really our major funding is aimed at public health and economic recovery, and that we'll be considering late in 21 into 2022 how the second tranche might be invested? I was just wondering, rather than making them look for it, should we try to summarize that for them?
Chair Harrington, I would be happy to do that if you think that serves the interests of the letter. The one caveat I would put to that is from the tone of the letter from the delegation, they very much feel that this is aligned with the economic development dollars. So I didn't want to commit your board's action on that first tranche of economic development in any way, or imply in any way the levels of flexibility and choices that are being made with those specific dollars. But adding that time frame directly into the letter is, I think, would be very beneficial, and I'd be happy to do that.
Well, board members, from my recollection of our June meeting, we're really the funding that we talked about with tranche 1 is really our continued response and economic recovery, and really looking towards that second tranche for the possibility of further economic recovery from the standpoint of investing into the recovery as opposed to responding to the immediate pains of the economic crisis. So it's really trying to, I wanted to make sure they don't think we're sitting there with $58 million burning a hole through our pocket. Rather, we're really responding to the very real pain of our residents and of our local area businesses to be open. And that's all. So I just felt like we would help ourselves by being a little bit more proactive in there. So I'll just put that idea out there and we can come back to it. The second thing I was wondering about is, moving forward with an effort like this, we don't have unlimited staff, right? And our staff right now is highly programmed with our LUT staff is highly programmed. And so I was really thinking about, okay, so if there's to be a county-wide effort, it's really going to need to be supported through local city contributions towards a county-wide effort. And we also, our role is to help serve those Washington County unincorporated areas. But even then, we have to figure out how, through a future work plan, how to use our limited resources to be able to participate. And so I wasn't sure if we need to be clear now that when and how we might be able to participate in such a county-wide effort as they're suggesting is still very much an assignment that we haven't had an opportunity to work on. So that was the other school of thought. Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Well, yeah, I think I am. I'm trying to process a little bit about what their letter ask is, if it's just specifically countywide and how we're going to use ARPA money to provide broadband services to both our unincorporated and our rural areas. Excuse me. And in addition, Aaron, you know that I'm working with Colpac and realizing that's Western Washington County and Colpac's region, which doesn't incorporate all of the rural areas of Washington County, but certainly a significant part of it. I kind of think it's important that we at least mention that we are working with Colpac to facilitate rural broadband in not only Washington County, but Columbia and Clatsop counties. And that we're working on, excuse me, I'm going to cough and I don't want to do that in everybody. And that we're working on that basically as a foundational approach to expanding that opportunity. And then just for the board's sake, remember that we have a middle mile study that has already been conducted that would probably need to be brushed up a little bit, but it was completed in December of 2017 and submitted to the commissioners in January of 18. That's a year before any of us except for Roy was there. And then the study that we have just commissioned through Colpac is again a middle mile study, and it's going to put a lot of the pieces together. So I don't know how we communicate what we are doing and where we are going on a fairly fast track in partnership with Colpac, and how we can use that to include next steps in basically Washington County. So there's a number of pieces to this. Sherwood and Wilsonville have indicated they'd like to kind of they're doing something like this. So keeping everybody on the same page is going to be a little difficult right now, and it's certainly not a part of what Colpac and I have taken on. But I think we need to communicate some of that in the letter, that we are moving ahead, and we'll certainly be having conversations about how we can best facilitate ARPA money, either in the first tranche or the second tranche, to really kickstart rural broadband.
Well, and I don't know that we're all in agreement that we want to limit that to just rural broadband. But back to one of your starting statements about the letter, their letter is a very clear ask. Prepare a strategic plan for broadband investments across the county. And my starting point is, wait a second, we don't have a staff person that we can assign such a project to. And that's not going to change for the next or through the remainder of this fiscal year. So that's why I don't want them to think that, oh yeah, well, soon we'll be able to get to it. So that's why I think we need to put a little bit more into this letter than we currently have. So certainly all that you've talked about in what's being done is good information. But I mean, their suggestion is good. It would be good for us to have a coordinated county approach as opposed to all these pockets of collections. And we could do that, but we'd have to hire a consultant to do that. And we know whenever we hire a consultant, we need to make sure there's someone on the team that can absorb that information and then carry it forward. So I think we need a little bit more time on the letter and our response, just from what the two of us have contributed. So,
well, I've always emphasized rural broadband because that's where we started with this, and that was the conversation with Colpac.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not an either or situation, it's an and. There's no doubt that we have unincorporated areas and spots in our Washington County that certainly could need enhancements. I think obviously it will be easier to facilitate that, but you're right, we do need to have a coordinated effort, and we need to have a person to oversee all of that. But I'm trying not to let that get in the way of getting the stone moving, so to speak, by trying to swallow the whole pill. Okay, and so that's why I'm just advocating that we would at least incorporate some of the progress that we've made through the partnership with Colpac.
Oh, I agree. Represent what's already underway. Yes. Okay. But judging from the two active letters we've gotten from the Washington County loose collection, not quite a caucus, they want something clearer than that. And I think we need to help them appreciate what our world is a little bit more than they necessarily have spent any time or had the opportunity to hear about. Commissioner Rogers, what do you think?
Well, maybe some random thoughts, and they'll connect maybe at some point. First of all, Jerry, I think you've done a great job in advocating. It's really difficult when you're in areas, and I represent a large unincorporated rural area, not like you or the chair, but I do as well. And so I commend you for that. I also appreciate that there is such a complexity to this story. It's much like when we're doing roads and transportation systems. You don't want them to connect to nowhere. You want them to be sized so that they appropriately work with other systems. So you'd hate to put something in a rural area that in 5 years they say, well, it's obsolete and it doesn't connect to anybody because it's not the latest technology. In regard to the letter that we received, and I read it, I appreciated that they're concerned. I didn't see any money attached to it from the legislature. It's easy to point to somebody else and say, I think you ought to do these things. And not that we shouldn't, but we have such a variety of folks. In your own district area, you represent Hillsborough, one of the biggest cities in the state, and then some very rural. You know, I represent a whole collage of smaller cities, but some pretty good size as well. And so I think my response would be thanking people for their letter, asking if they have some participatory way that they want to be involved to raise funds to do what really needs to be done. And that we're not the only player. I think this broadband is particularly important for the educational community. There are a lot of kids out there who need to be connected, but that's not our venue. I mean, that's the school district. There's rural fire districts, important to them, not our venue. But we certainly like to cooperate and participate with them. So to me, if we wanted to do anything, it would be to and I encourage us to, not to thwart what you do, even though I understand it may not be of best value 5, 6, 7, 10 years from now, but to see if there wasn't some coalition that could be orchestrated that maybe yourself, the chair, somebody would coordinate to talk about all these needs and say, at a high level, and I'm saying 60,000, not even 30,000 feet, but 60,000, what do they vision we ought to do so that we're not just jumping into something, spending money, and it's not a coordinated effort. So random thoughts, but that's where I think I am on this subject.
All right, we're going to need to wrap this up. Commissioner Trees, Commissioner Fye, do you have any input? 1, 2, 3, go.
Thank you for the countdown. I think I won't take a minute here. I think you've all expressed concerns. I guess my question is really now to you, Chair, and back to Erin. Does Erin know what her marching orders are, so to speak, here? Is she comfortable?
I think there's more that needs to be done to the letter, and we don't have the time to do it in this meeting today.
So we'll have another view of the letter later, is what I'm thinking.
At a future date. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
You betcha. All righty. So we only had that one letter this week, right? Okay, great. All right. Checking in on the agenda for tonight. Are there any questions or whatnot? We have item C2 was added and item D1 was revised. Any other things commissioners need to share or close on before tonight's meeting? Nope. Great. All righty then. We'll move on to the next item on our work session agenda, about 20 minutes off target. Planning Commission appointment discussion. Stephen Roberts and company.
Good afternoon. So we are back today to talk with you again about Planning Commissioner appointments. We have 2 appointments. One is the tail end of a current term that would allow someone to serve 2 full additional terms, and we have the majority of a full term, and then a person that would be able to serve 1 additional term after that. And I think maybe with that, I'll just ask if Todd or Teresa wants to add anything, and then we can just open up for discussion.
Thanks, Stephen. So, yeah, so what our ask today is for the board is to select the 2 candidates for these District 1 positions, and then to authorize an action for the August 17th board meeting to appoint the candidates. And then also to give specific direction on which candidate you are appointing to which position, since, as Stephen indicated, the positions have different appointment dates. And I will just clarify, the first appointee would serve the remainder of a 4-year term that began January 31st of this year and be eligible for 1 additional 4-year term. And then the second appointee would serve the remainder of a term expiring January 31st of 2022 and be eligible for 2 additional 4-year terms. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
So at this juncture, I'll turn it over to the District 1 Commissioner.
Thank you so much, Chair. And thank you so much, Stephen and Andy and Todd and everyone and Teresa for your patience and really engaging me in this conversation. I really appreciate it. And it's taken me a little bit longer than an experienced commissioner to get my footing in. You really presented a really great candidates, and I want to appreciate everyone that applied to be on the Planning Commission and represent for District 1. I really enjoyed reading the materials, and now that I am fully staffed and fully full-time commissioner, I had the opportunity to actually reach out to the volunteer applicants, candidates that really bubbled up for me and had a really honest and frank conversation around the expectations. And, I really appreciate to say that both candidates literally said, I love Washington County, and here's why I applied this, and here's what I can contribute. So I'm really excited and the contributions that this both candidates will have. And I think for the term, the way I calculated and the way I had the conversation with the candidates were around total numbers of years, because I think ending and starting was a hard. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, is that it's 7.6 years, right? 7 years.
Can I pause for a second?
Okay.
Maybe I'm out of sync. Aren't there 12 applicants? Did material get updated and I didn't notice it?
No.
Okay, so you mentioned 2.
For District, Stephen, you want to answer that question to the chair? I think you'll probably be more sensing.
Oh, sure. Well, I wonder if so. I think Commissioner Fye, are you talking about the two people that you're leaning toward?
Yeah, that's for District 1.
You're addressing more specifically those 2 applicants that you're interested in. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there's multiple districts. I'm just speaking for District 1. I think
there are only 2 positions that are open. Mm-hmm. There are 12 applicants total. Who are the 2 that you're recommending?
I'm recommending to move forward for Anastasia Milliman for for the term ending and the 1 additional term. And then Rachel Mori Bidu for the continuation of this term and the 2 additional terms.
So that would be Anastasia Middleman for vacancy number 2, where the term expires January 31st of 2022, and Rachel Mori Badeau for vacancy position number 1, where the term expires in January 31st of 2025.
I think maybe it's the other way around.
The other way around.
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. Is there anything more you wanted to say about those 2, now that at least I'm clear on who the 2 are?
Yeah, no, I just want to congratulate both and look forward to working, and thank you to the staff for embarking on this journey with me. Thank you so much. And we look forward to the future appointments. It'll be much more streamlined and quicker.
Excellent.
Other commissioners, did you have any questions or comments with regard to the recommendation to appoint these two folks to these two open positions as District 1 appointments?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. One in regard to the District 1, I have no qualms. I mean, that should be the District 1 commissioner making a recommendation. But I'd like to make a general comment. We've never done this, and I've often thought it might be a good idea. This is to you, Tanya, and to you, Stephen. There are a lot of committees that really don't have the same stress level as this committee. Not that they're not important and not that they don't have difficult situations, but some committees have a degree of stress, just like this board. We have a degree of stress. We come together and we have different viewpoints and we have to work together. In business, what you often do is you will have everything from simple tests like Myers-Briggs to just sit down with people who are on the committee to see how they work together. And you say, well, why is that important? Well, you find dysfunctional boards if you can't find that you have some commonality and some appreciation. So what I'm thinking in the future, just a suggestion, nothing to do with this one. This is, this one's gone, but why don't we spend a bit of effort on some of these committees and maybe involve in the process recommendations from maybe other committee members, or maybe test to see if they get along. When I hire people in my small organization, not the county, but my small, I want to make certain that the people they're working with feel that that's a good relationship. Because if it's not, I know it won't be accomplished. Things won't get accomplished and we'll have lots of conflict and strife. So anyway, I recommend that we just make it a little bit more robust and think about what other folks do as best practices. But in regard to Commissioner Fai's recommendations, I've always said it's the district commissioner's call. So I am happy to support those nominations.
Any other commissioner comments? Okay, looks like we have a recommendation that folks are comfortable having come before us on August 17th.
Well, thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, then we'll move on to the next topic. Proposed revision to the Washington County Ordinance 599, Chapter 8.4, Access to Tobacco by Minors. For at least 4 of us, I think we'll recall that tobacco retail licensing came up and we had a presentation sometime in 2019. I've not been able to spend the time looking back at records. I hope we'll be reminded as to what that was. And at this point, we'll turn it over to Tricia Mortel and Gwen Ashcombe. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. I agree. I still have what I would call COVID brain and COVID fog. It is good to reground ourselves in this conversation. As noted, I'm Tricia Mortel, Public Health Division Manager for 4 more days, and I have here with me Gwen Ashcombe, our Tobacco Prevention Coordinator. Next slide, please. So looking back as to what we have discussed in the past and what has happened in the past around tobacco prevention strategies, we were very excited in 2017 when Oregon raised minimum purchase rates from 18 to 21, a big win for Oregon. In 2019, we spent time with the board talking about what are additional things that we could do at the local level to prevent minors' access to tobacco and reduce tobacco addiction in our community. At that time, there was efforts in the state legislature for a tobacco retail licensure at the state level, but we didn't know if it would pass. And as a reminder, we are one of very few states, Gwen will pipe in on the number because she's the data person here, but one of very few states who actually don't license those who sell these products. unlike those who sell alcohol and other products that we want to have some control over. So we talked with you about updating a current ordinance that we have on the books to not only first make it current with language, but add additional protections in terms of what is possible for us. And the big conversation at that time, as you know, was the tobacco industry's interest in gaining a foothold and getting folks, particularly our young folks, hooked on vaping. So we don't know a lot about vaping. It's a new product. We don't have years of study with these types of flavors and additions to the product that we've had over the multiple years of our original work with understanding the problems that people encountered and the health impact of cigarettes. So we were very poised. Your board was very supportive of our work at that time, and we all know what happened, and it was the pandemic. So we were needed to step back and take a moment and focus on another crisis that we were dealing with that took precedence. At that time, we were working with cities as well, because if we put together an ordinance in our county, in most cases, we would need to engage with our cities to, for example, do tobacco retail licensure. It's not considered something that we could do without their support. So we had worked with city boards, city managers, city mayors, and had received a lot of support for that conversation. But in this last legislative session, there was some advancements at the state level and that we can all be very proud of. Exactly. Thank you, Chair. 2 thumbs up. Oregon did raise tobacco taxes and instituted a vape tax. If you might remember, vape products were not taxed at all. So that was the up and coming new product out on the market, and it wasn't even taxed. They were able to successfully prohibit online sales of delivery products. I'm sure that there's a lot of gyration here as to how they'll actually enforce it, but that was one pushback we had from folks who were saying, well, our kids will just get it online. So we are really glad to see that. And of course, statewide tobacco retail licensure passed this last legislative session. So that means our county and every other county in this state will have requirements for businesses that sell tobacco products. So what does that mean for us here in the county? So next slide. That means that, again, any retailer selling these products must have a license to do so. OHA will be the holder of the licenses, and they can issue penalties for violations, and it will require an annual inspection. But Senate Bill 587 also gave us some local authority. We can administer and enforce this new statewide policy, providing additional outreach and education, and we can add additional protective strategies for our county, as well as issue civil penalties. So we're here today to talk to you again about the additional protective strategies that we would think would be very important for Washington County youth. And Gwen has a proposal that we think has a lot of support from businesses and others in our community, and we want to bring that forward to you today. So I'll turn it over to Gwen.
Thank you, Tricia. We can go to the next slide. So what's the protective strategies? What are we looking at? We know the tobacco industry channels more advertising and discounts into neighborhoods with high proportions of residents who are people of color or have low socioeconomic status. The prevalence of tobacco make it easier and cheaper for these residents to start and continue using these addictive products. So we can strengthen the state TRL. We have an opportunity to alter the systems and policies that perpetuate inequity by replacing them with new policies that purposefully lead to health and equity. So we can do this by restricting flavors to establishments that only serve people who are 21 years and older, and by prohibiting price promotions and discounts. Next slide, please. So why flavors? Because we know who's using them, and it's our young people. This data that you're seeing on the slide is reflective of those who reported using a tobacco flavored product from our Oregon Healthy Teens and our behavioral risk factor surveillance system data. So currently there's over 15,000 flavors on the market, and that list just continues to grow. Flavors mask the natural harshness and taste of tobacco, making the flavored tobacco product much easier to use and increasing their appeal, especially among young people. So the combination of nicotine and flavoring with candy names like bubblegum, strawberry, tropical fusion, and grape targets young people specifically and contributes to smoking rates and nicotine addiction at a very early age. Research has shown that the youth are more likely to start with a flavored product than with traditional tobacco flavors. Next slide, please. So as we stated earlier, we know that tobacco retailers cluster in neighborhoods with high percentage of low-income residents or residents of color. These communities are specifically targeted by the tobacco industry, and these communities disproportionately suffer the health harms caused by tobacco use. The tobacco industry has long used the point of sale to target consumers, not just based on their race, ethnicity, and income, but also on their mental health status, gender, and sexual orientation as well. And according to the research, for every 10% increase in the price of cigarettes, adult smoking decreases by 3 to 5%, and youth smoking decreases by 6 to 7%. The tobacco industry knows that cheap prices help to lure new users and keep current users hooked. So they spend billions of dollars each year on price discounts and coupons to reduce those prices and keep them low. And studies have also found that people who purchase discount brands or use coupons or other price cuts make fewer attempts to quit tobacco use, and they're less likely to reduce their tobacco consumption overall. In fact, research has estimated that smoking rates would drop by 13% if price promotions were prohibited nationwide. So youth and young adults are more price sensitive than older adults. Lower prices encourage youth to initiate tobacco use, and along with coupons and other price discounts, it just encourages youth to move from experimentation to regular smoking. Next slide, please. So we've been talking to the community, we've been talking to our stakeholders to see how they feel about this, and we've gotten support. We've wanted to gauge their readiness and support for tobacco retail licensure, as well as these additional protective strategies. So last summer, we conducted a community panel survey, and of our survey respondents, 87% were in favor of tobacco retail licensing, 61% were in favor of prohibiting price promotions, and 58% were in favor of banning flavors altogether. So we know we do have a lot of interest and support behind this. We've also gotten support from members of our Substance Use Prevention Collaborative, which are made up of community stakeholders that have a vested interest in youth substance prevention work. That's our schools, other organizations that work with young people, or other community-based organizations. We've also spoken with our Public Health Advisory Council, and they've also expressed their support for this work, as well as our city partners. I've gone and spoken with 10 out of 12 cities, and all of those cities have expressed support in flavor restrictions and price promotion and discounts prohibiting those. We also have partners in the Oregon Partners for Tobacco Prevention Coalition, and those are American Lung Association, American Cancer Society, American Heart Association, Oregon Coalition of Local Health Officials, Oregon Nurses Association, Tobacco Free Coalition of Oregon, and Upstream Public Health, as well as our other partners in our other counties doing this tobacco prevention work. So now where are we at? For that, I'm going to hand it back over to Tricia to take the next slide. Thank you.
So even though we've been focused on COVID-19 pandemic and we brought forward to you the opioid crisis and deaths of despair, suicide in our community, smoking and addiction to tobacco is still a significant problem, health problem for our community and all of America. At this point, CDC says cigarette smoking is still responsible for more than 483 deaths a year. Almost 1 in 5 deaths are related to smoking. And on average, smokers die 10 years earlier than non-smokers. So our hope, our goal when we work in prevention is that we can stop at the beginning, because as you've heard many times, this addiction is very strong. I have a personal story in my family, as many of you probably do too. So our goal is to protect youth and protect youth from a continued advancement of new products. Gwen is always finding about some new product that is being pushed out and being marketed to youth without any understanding of the health impact that it will have today, tomorrow, and into the future. So we're asking for your permission to work with County Council to bring before you a change to the county ordinance. We would be sunsetting the current ordinance and bringing forward a new ordinance, particularly as will be related to licensure and enforcement. And that is a piece that we will be doing as part of our public health practice and the new state law. But we believe that adding these additional protections is the best interest for Washington County.
Commissioners, questions and comments?
What a way to.
I have one. Tricia, I have to, well, first I'll make a statement. I've never smoked, so, I mean, I really don't know these addictions, but tell me, vaping and synthetic nicotine, I'm trying to wrench out of you the last bit of knowledge since you're going to be departing from us. If I were in this business, I would try to figure out other substances that I could put in these products that you didn't cover by your ordinance. And it's out of ignorance, because I need to be educated. Is there other substances and other ways of packaging so that we should be broadly writing these with Tom's help there, that we don't find that in 6 months, they just switch the product mix and you're dealing with the same problem, only different substance?
Yeah. So in particular, we don't have a lot of ability to regulate products. That really is at the federal level. So Gwen and her team and the state work with the federal government to really look at the restrictions on products. And there have been a lot of efforts to try to restrict vaping and other products that have come onto the market, but we haven't been successful. So our goal is to keep them behind closed doors, let's say. So in a shop where someone is most likely to be carded, in a 21 and older shop, or I guess that's an old term, I'm really old here, but we're not at a 7-Eleven or at a smaller retail store where they're just selling these occasionally, and perhaps someone is really sending in their oldest looking friend to get the product. So in addition, as Gwen mentioned, we really think that reducing the price, promotion, and discounts would make sure that when communities of color aren't targeted, and particularly youth of color and others who have higher addiction rates. We know, for example, that the largest amount of smoking is still in those populations that have mental health and behavioral health issues.
Commissioner Fye? Commissioner Fye, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll go next. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Gwen, I don't know if you remember me, but back in, this goes all the way to 2014. So, and Tricia, what a way to retire and close your career, to make TRL a reality for, to see it not only for Oregon, but also for Washington County as well. My question is, and hopefully it's an opportunity to expand the flavor restrictions and just have a conversation of what you're thinking are around the flavor restrictions, and mainly interested in really seeing if there's an opportunity to include banning menthol in there. As we know, we're all interested in reducing addiction and curbing the death that's related from cigarettes. And I think that this is one way. And I think it sounds like even the FDA is really gathering data around this issue. So is Washington County going to brave up and include menthol in that flavor restriction?
So if our commissioners would like us to do that, we can take that step. We did not bring that forward for you today. Our restriction is probably more supported by businesses in terms of those who are vape shops are in support. I think that we could certainly bring that forward as part of the ordinance if the council would so choose.
And I would like to add that, yes, I have mentioned menthol when I've been speaking with other cities as being a flavor. So including mint and menthol, so kind of separating out a little bit from vape to that. So my hope is that, yes, menthol would be included as a flavor. And as you mentioned, the FDA is working on banning menthol, but we know that could take some time. So it would be wonderful for Washington County to take that step first and start working on those efforts, since we know it does take time when it comes to the FDA.
Yeah, and I think if memory serves me correct, Oregon was before the FDA in terms of regulating e-cigarettes. So sometimes we can apply pressure, even though we're a small city or state in the Pacific Northwest. So I think I take that as a pride as an Oregonian to say we did it, and then the FDA actually regulated e-cigarettes. So I support moving forward. I'll give a thumbs up, Chair Harrington, in terms of policy directions, and look forward to continuing, and congratulations to all of us who's been working to make this a reality. I know for sure for Washington County state legislators, I want to congratulate Senator Steina Hayward. I know this, back in my days in the state capitol, 2013, 2014 time, she had this was a big passion of her, and she had a bill around tobacco retail licensing that she was championing. So kudos to everyone who pushed this.
Thank you, Commissioner Fye. So what I learned from that is that the current proposal that staff was planning on moving forward with did not include menthol and mint as identified flavors. But there is a potential for us to provide direction for that today as well. Did I understand that correctly, Commissioner Fye and Gwen and Tricia?
Okay. Right. So that would mean, just for clarity, that we would totally prohibit that product. So, or perhaps we should check with Commissioner Fye if that is the recommendation. But that is the interest at the federal level to prohibit sale of that product itself, what in any store. So is that the wishes of the board?
So not just for vaping, but for menthol or mint added to cigarettes as well.
That is the current interest of the national level. But Gwen, do you want to weigh in here?
Yeah. So national is eventually we will see menthol completely banned nationwide. That's where the FDA is planning on going. Right now, menthol would be included as a flavor and would be restricted at establishments that are 21 and over only. So we wouldn't have menthol cigarettes in our grocery stores, convenience stores. You would have to go to a place of 21 and over. We would consider it a flavor. So that's where we want, to see if that's still the direction you would like to go.
So that second bullet, I'm on the board policy direction slide. So the first one specifically calls out vaping and synthetic nicotine products. The second bullet is all tobacco related products flavored, not just vaping products, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
All flavors, yes.
Yes, okay. All right, well, let's keep going through all the commissioners. Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Well, yeah, just for clarification, and this part always, I forget this until we get to the finish. Is this just unincorporated Washington County we're talking about? Or are we including the cities under this?
So at this point, because according to County Council support, with the advent of statewide tobacco retail licensure, it would be a countywide ordinance through Public Health Authority.
And so we would be countywide, including the cities, banning menthol cigarettes from sale in grocery stores and requiring them to go to tobacco establishments basically to buy them. Is that correct?
That's a proposal as part of this.
I'm not sure what I think about that. Although conceptually, I don't disagree. I am a former smoker. Way back in the day, cigarettes were 10 cents a package. And if you remember the commercial, you won't, Nafisa, you're way too young. We've come a long way, baby, Virginia Slims. Okay. So for us to move this direction, and certainly with all of the health dangers and everything else of smoking, I completely get where we're going. And the statistics on the vaping and the synthetics and all of that was astounding to me. But I guess then again, not surprising because, you know, they are kind of like candy. So with all of that, I'm in agreement with that. I'm not sure I'm on board with including menthol cigarettes. I would prefer that to come from a federal mandate. If that's what's on the horizon out there, then I would just as soon not lead that charge because I think that's a pretty significant change to remove menthol cigarettes from grocery stores.
So now you've all managed to confuse the heck out of me. I thought I heard that menthol and mint would be considered flavor restrictions. And so this board policy direction would apply there. So it's not extending this recommendation. It's just part of your recommendation to us. Am I understanding that?
Well, there are many, I think that why it's confusing, there's many ways that we could look at limiting access to menthol and mint products. And so that's why I think it's unclear. What we could do is bring back some proposed language and go back and consider what are the opportunities to, particularly with our focus on equity and our focus on access to youth, and bring back some language for you to look at.
And we do, I do want to highlight that menthol, the reason that we include menthol and mint is that it's one of the more popular flavors to use among our youth, but particularly menthol has a history of impacting the African-American community negatively and heavily in their specific stores that are in their communities, also LGBTQ. So this, including this, is enhancing the whole equity effort. Then leaving one product out and therefore one community specifically still left targeted didn't feel right. So that's why wanting to include it all as the flavor so that we can make sure that we're standing up for the entire community of Washington County versus just segments of our community.
And hence, I think is one of the mistakes I was making in understanding this. This ordinance is with regard to access to minors, right? So adults age 21 and older can still buy menthol cigarettes at the grocery store, right?
No, it would be considered a flavor. So how we're proposing it would be in places of 21 and over to purchase. So
But
all
they're
your
not
flavors.
minors. So the
Right.
title of this is all about access to minors.
Right. If you're under 21, yeah, you could potentially see the product.
So that goes back
Yeah,
to the concept that if it's in a 21 and older establishment, that's more protection for people to ensure that youth aren't getting access. We do know that youth in particular have ways of, really gathering together around neighborhood stores and small stores and getting access at a higher rate.
I guess I'm just a little confused over what the proposal applies to. Sorry. Hang on a second. I interrupted Commissioner Willie because I was trying to understand the proposal based upon his comments. So I see you, Commissioner Treese, but let me bring it back to Commissioner Willie. I just fundamentally don't understand anymore. I understand what Senate Bill 587 enumerates per the third slide in the presentation, but this summary slide just confused me. I'm sorry. Commissioner Willie, back to you.
Well, and yeah, and I guess my understanding was a little bit different, but that didn't make it right. I was looking at this as we're doing this age 21 in specific places where you had to go to buy these products, and we do it as a restrictive nature for teenagers, but it also applies to those over 21. So if you want this product, no matter how old you are, you have to go to one of these licensed retail licensures.
Well,
so that's why, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so all shops will be licensed, but you'd need to go to a 21 and over shop. And that would be the same if an adult wants a flavored vape product. That's what we're proposing here, that we're putting some more bumpers and constrictions on things that are more attractive to youth. So it would be the same for an adult who wants a cherry vape product. They couldn't get it at the neighborhood market in our ordinance. They'd have to go to a 21 and older shop. So it would be the same kind of thing. If that helps at all, commissioners.
Well, but in addition to that, and I get that. That's where we were going with this, updating the county ordinance, okay? And I was completely on board with that. When you throw in menthol and menthol cigarettes, then you're going after a different segment. And I don't think that was the original intent of this proposal. And my inclination is you can either hit the pause button and not do this right now until you do the research on the other impacts, or we can go ahead with this and have future consideration on adding menthol as a flavor. So that's kind of where I am.
Correct.
I figured out why I got confused, but I'll come back to it last. Commissioner Treese?
Thank you, and thank you for your work, Tricia and Gwen. And this is an important issue. Smoking of any type is a huge health hazard. I'm always in favor of making sure that we that we are cognizant of the health hazard that it is, and at the same time that I believe that when we institute these types of things, we have to communicate about smoking cessation opportunities, vaping cessation opportunities, whatever it might be. So I would encourage us, if we move forward with this, to also at the same time be communicating about what type of resources are available for people to quit, because I think that that's a very important piece as well.
Thank you.
I have one final question, and this is to Tom. You don't have to answer right now. Whenever you do prohibit price reductions or discounts, and you're targeting an industry, it sounds like a restraint of trade. And I'm always concerned how broadly that's interpreted. And I don't know if you can do it. And again, I don't have a oar in the water on smoking because I never did it and don't like it. But it just doesn't sound like that would be sustainable if we were sued. Or it might be a nose under the tent if we wanted to say, well, we're going to prohibit discounts and price reductions on anybody, any product, just because we think that's a good thing. So would you look into that? I don't expect an answer right now, but. Yeah.
I can give you a general answer, and that's that the antitrust laws exempt state action. So if a state has authorized a local government to do something and the government acts in good faith doing that under state authority, it comes under the state action exemption to the antitrust laws. I used to be an antitrust lawyer in my earlier days, and of course I'm not admitted yet. So you're getting my earlier days, but we can do a more detailed analysis if you like, Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, we can work with county council. We have connections at the national level for other states and jurisdictions who have done these kinds of protections.
And I can let you know that the most recent county to do a price promotion, banning price promotions and discounts was Clatsop County. So they're the one that just recently did that just several months ago. So yeah, so we can definitely get more information for you.
Okay, so I'll step back, and I realize how I managed to trip myself up and get lost. And it's when I started thinking about grocery stores. So I'm trying to make sure I have it clear in my mind what you're recommending and what it means for the availability of buying products now. So I need to step through it a little more slowly in my mind. So I am all for making sure that our youth have less access and exposure to these products. 100% there. There are probably a whole bunch of cases of availability that I'm not even aware of that I will get smarter about through the next step of the process. But let me try and make it clear that I am with you 100% in attending to this matter. And I am grateful, Tricia, but particularly Gwen. Gwen, as you were talking about how reiterating the data or verbalizing the data for us, sharing with us the penetration with youth, communities of color, and how important it is that we help folks have better health outcomes throughout their long lives. Golly day, when I was in my teen years and experimenting with cigarettes, good thing I didn't like them and I choked on them. Yuck. But little did I know then that I would be living for so many decades and that those choices early in life would have such impact further down. We don't come with manuals. But anyway, so I'm with you 100%. So I do want to make sure that it's harder for our youth than it has been, and that these flavor restrictions, as you recommend, are in place, and that we prohibit price promotions and discounts. I'll say from my own experience that there was a time, and I can't remember which state I lived in, but they removed the availability of happy hours for alcohol. So I thought that was a good thing too. So just because these are such addictive substances and the impact of social behavior. The part that I really tripped myself up on was thinking about grocery store availability. I have this impression that both at grocery stores and general retailers right now, people can buy cigarettes and I assume e-cigarettes behind the counter, that they're kept behind the counter. And am I correct in understanding that this recommendation would require the sales of such places to be, all places have to be licensed, but does that mean that these general stores, as I'm labeling them using air quotes, like grocery stores and smaller retail establishments like Pacific or Pantry Pride or 7-Eleven would not be able to sell such products. That's where I'm a little confused.
Yeah. So Senate Bill 587 is a general tobacco retail license. You have to have a license to sell the product, regardless if you're a small market and you just have a tiny display or you're a big chain, supermarket. So yes, it's required for all across the entire state.
That you have a license.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to have, the license. So that doesn't change versus if you have whatever, you could sell a tiny bit or a large amount, but your license is going to be the same.
Great. But what we're saying in this proposal is that all flavors would be restricted and any and all price promotions and discounts would no longer be available. Okay, I understand the proposal and I'm all set with moving forward with that proposal. And thank you so much for being patient with me.
So we have heard some concern from Commissioner Willie about bringing forward language around menthol and mint products. We've heard support from Commissioner Fye and just general support for this. So just need some clarity if you would like for us to bring forward language to consider regarding those products. We'd be glad to add that to our draft.
So what I heard you say earlier is that you classify menthol and mint as flavors, and therefore it's part of your recommendation.
We did not bring that forward today. We did not add that to the original concept.
Okay.
So it would be an additional body of work that we would do to bring that forward.
So I wrote down the wrong answer then with regard to that question. So my apologies.
It's a complex conversation.
So let me just pose the question. We had the opportunity to hear from Gwen that there is data available about the attractiveness of menthol and mint as flavors to younger people and other community members, that the FDA is looking at banning those, but asking us if we want to include those two flavors in the list of flavors. So my question that I'm asking you is to give a thumbs up now if you would like to see those added to the list of flavors. Okay, well, you have 3 of us today, 4 of us, so go ahead and write it up and we'll go the next steps. I think I've summarized that you have direction to move on the whole ordinance. And I just have one other question. Gwen, it's a pleasure to meet you. I don't know that I had the chance to meet you back when we used to get to meet, but I have a question for you. Each of you are Public Health Division Manager. Tricia Mortel has a MPH, which I think is a Master's in Public Health, but and Tricia also has an RD. That's a doctorate in.
I'm a registered dietitian, actually.
Registered dietitian, thank you. Well, Gwen, you have another credential that I'm not familiar with, and I'm hopeful that you will enlighten us and bring us to life because you've earned these credentials.
Yeah, it's the MCHES, and it's a Master Certified Health Education Specialist, and it's actually through the National Commission of Health Education Credentialing. So it's a national credential, and it says health education, but it's very much a public health credential. Yes.
So it's an expertise in the public health domain.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being part of our team.
Thank you. Nice talking to you, Commissioners.
So sorry it took me a while to follow this whole journey, but I'm on it, and I think all of us have had the opportunity of learning more today and having you answer our questions. So we'll look forward to the next steps of more specificity for a draft ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you. All righty, so we're a little bit behind today. Sorry, folks, I'm not doing great on it on agenda management. So it's not quite. Oh, there we go. It's 3:40. My watch is wrong. Would you like a 15-minute break or to try and shorten it? Nope, 15 minutes. Okay, we'll see you back here at 15 minutes then, 5 of the hour. Thank you. How's everybody doing?
Commissioner Treese, Commissioner Rogers, Commissioner Fire, are you back with us?
All righty. So why don't we move on to our next topic then? Our Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. Latricia Tillman with a quarterly report. Welcome. Turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. Can you hear me okay? I can't see anybody nodding, so
yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So I am coming before you today and happy to be here to provide my third quarterly report on the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagements, just 10 months into my role as Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer. And I'm going to, as usual, provide some initial remarks to contextualize the work you are supporting, and then share about progress that we've made toward the initial directives of the equity resolution. So to start with context, I'm going to share 3 ways that I'm thinking about how we locate ourselves in time in the work that we're doing, which I'm thinking about as a change process nested in social change, cultural change, and organizational change. So next slide, please. So this is a familiar image. As I mentioned in our previous briefings, equity, diversity, and inclusion are all about how we value people and time. And the timeline shows the 400-year legacy of slavery, which was all about the disregard for human life, evolving into segregation, and now sort of hopefully pivoting towards a time of more equity, but always with a pushback and resistance to that work. And if we overlay on that the more than 500 years of the impact of colonialism on tribes and tribal people in the United States, who had enjoyed a 14,000-year pre-colonial history of self-determination and governance, and the focus of our governmental policy was specifically focused on dispossessing Indigenous people of their cultures and economies. So it's really hard to imagine how to represent that period of time going back to what Indigenous people refer to as time immemorial on a timeline. But I will attempt to incorporate that into future presentations. And so it really helps to locate us in a very small period of time on a long trajectory of history. So with the adoption of the Washington County Equity Resolution, our task, as I mentioned before now, is reconnecting ourselves and our jurisdiction to the humanity that we've collectively lost as a result of both colonialism and the institution of slavery, and to heal from generational trauma, which we know and science continues to reveal is still contributing to numerous generations of negative physical and behavioral health impacts. So recognizing that governmental policies have negatively impacted Indigenous and Black people and other immigrant and refugee communities over generations, through both explicitly racist policies and many policies and practices that don't specifically name race, it is safe to assume that moving forward without an explicit exploration of how to advance equity in all of our policies, that we're perpetuating systems that were born out of racism and white supremacy by maintaining their status quo. So I want to just pause and appreciate the board and the department directors that are calling out the ways that they are interrogating how their practices, their policies, the proposals they bring before you, how they can explicitly incorporate an equity lens, recognizing that historically we have not done that. Next slide, please. Additionally, as I mentioned, thinking about the work that we're doing as change work, I want to locate us in a timeline of change. So the equity resolution and the establishment of the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement and the Equity Leadership Council is ushering in a significant period of change for Washington County. And we are moving forward mindful of the need to attend to the stages of change. And it's interesting, we just did a department director retreat this morning and also talked about these same stages of change. And I've heard the board make comments as equity considerations become part of your deliberations and conversations that really made me aware of the need to touch on this explicitly. So clearly, as you adopted the equity resolution, you pivoted away from the status quo, the old way of working, where maybe conversations about equity were not consistent or explicit in your policy deliberations. And so with the introduction of change, we see some challenging of assumptions about how things have been in the past. And so I would say at this point, we're probably in sort of stage 3 or 4, resistance and unlearning, where people may be reacting to how conversations are evolving around equity, saying, I didn't expect this kind of conversation or this kind of policy moving forward. And so we're kind of in this place of knowing that the past is, we're not going back there, but we're not exactly sure of what are the skill sets or the ways that we need to build equity into our work going forward. So we're in a period of unlearning kind of past practices, maybe things we took for granted, assumptions we made. And so it definitely is a time of disruption, as you know, things that we thought before, it doesn't work for us now. So as we move forward, we'll be looking to invest more in training and capacity building, and that is real work. It takes time. It's not often visible in the ways that our policies change or our systems change, but it helps us move towards a new idea, a new way of work. And over time, as we integrate new learning, we'll settle in to a new status quo, a new way of being. And the vision that you all laid out in the equity resolution is that new way of being will include having an explicit focus on equity and racial justice going forward, and a clear commitment to equitable access to the services we provide, quality and outcomes. So I just wanted to touch on that because some of the questions that I hear you grappling with as a board really suggest that you're in those early stages of change. On the next slide. So this really shortens down the timeline to about just slightly over a year, year and a half or so, from the actual adoption of the equity resolution to the funding of the office to my start in the office. And then since September, when I started, we've been in a process of bringing on new staff. We started our quarterly updates and launched our Equity Leadership Council, which was one of the pillars of the equity resolution. In the spring, we launched the Equity Leadership Council committees, which really engages a whole new set of change leaders to help move equity, diversity, and inclusion best practices throughout the organization. And then we're starting now to pivot as we're onboarding more capacity within the equity team to engaging with the community for the co-creation of the Advisory Council on Racial Equity, which we expect to launch in November. And this represents a little bit of a later launch date than I had initially anticipated. And that's just in part because of the need to slow down, to build out and manage the workload of the Equity Leadership Council and its committees, as well as to onboard the new staff to provide some of that staffing capacity for the structures that we're building out. Next slide. So my thought around bringing on staff, I refer a lot to the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, who talks about the elements needed for businesses to move from being good to really being excellent at what they do. And he talks about it in three stages. One is disciplined people, servant leaders, and the right people, getting the right people on the team and building out community and staff engagement structures. And the second phase is disciplined thought. So really confronting the brutal facts and for us focusing on the root causes of inequity. And then third, disciplined action. So building best practice and innovation. So it's both the freedom of innovating and the responsibility for assuring high quality service. And so for us right now, I would say we're very much in the place of the first stage, disciplined people. So really, as we build out our team, we're looking for and excited to be working with people who have a heart for service, who are very thoughtful about best practice and really, working hard and committed to high quality product and process. So building out the right people on our team. So since the last time that I was here, we have successfully recruited and we're in the process of onboarding Ashley Horn, who is our equity policy manager. I spoke last time about Kitty Kong, who's an internal hire. She was working on the procurement team and has joined us as supplier diversity coordinator. And then just yesterday, we started Sean Hartfield, who will serve as our civil rights coordinator. And he has a long track record of supporting both organizations and development of their civil rights compliance work, as well as consulting with companies, and then also providing in past practice some direct legal services. He won't be actually practicing any kind of law while he's here, but he will be providing leadership for us as we move forward in our civil rights compliance efforts. Next slide. And then, of course, the community engagement team has really been the cornerstone and the engine of our office since I started last fall, supporting both external community engagement for many of your board initiatives and providing support for what I would call more blended internal and external community building related to equity. Earlier this spring, as I mentioned, the team grew by one staff member, Ty Schwefferman, who you all met, and he's focused on engaging community partners to advance equity in our supportive housing services initiatives. So very appreciative for all the team and all of their work. And next slide. So as we pivot towards talking about what's been happening and some of the metrics that we're testing and providing you with an update, I'll hand it over to Amanda Garcia Snell, our community engagement program manager, who's been providing leadership to our team, and she'll provide you a more comprehensive update on this team's great work.
Thanks, Latricia. Good afternoon. I had hoped to see you in person today, but such is life. So as Latricia mentioned, I'm here to provide the community engagement portion of this quarterly update. So this slide, with the graphic here, the intent of this graphic is to illustrate the many touch points that exist for community to provide input to you all and the county as an organization. So I won't read all of these to you, but I did want to lift up that a couple of places where, while we do have formal work groups in the forms of boards and commissions, that you have members that you all appoint, we also have informal work groups on as another touch point, and those are things like our land acknowledgement work group, who you heard from last week, the COVID racial equity advisory group, who provide input as well. And so we do have other work groups in addition to these formal opportunities. And then all of the other things that are listed, like constituent communications, town halls, or the CPO program, the community participation organization program, open houses, department-specific opportunities. So lots of ways for people to engage and provide input to you all. Next slide, please. So as you recall, hopefully this is starting to look familiar. This is the strategic vision for community engagement for this calendar year that I have shared in the past. So just a quick reminder about the big buckets of work, where we're going and how we're doing our work. Next slide. So transitioning to board engagement. Next slide. Next slide, please. So this is a updated version of a graph that I shared with you in the last quarterly update, in the Q1 update. And as a reminder, it shows attendance at the board engagement events since May of 2020. So the green bars represent the events of this year, of 2021's calendar year, and the blue are last year, 2020. So each bar is a combination of unique participants on Zoom, as well as YouTube views on the day of the event. And generally speaking, we tend to have a greater number of participants on YouTube than on Zoom. Next slide. So transitioning to the demographic data improvements in regards to community participation. So specifically, we'll be looking at boards and commissions and focusing on sharing more demographic data in this update, and then tracking our progress toward more diverse, representative, and inclusive boards and commissions and CPOs. So next slide. So for boards and commissions, the green box is the recent quarter, Q2. The blue box is Q1, and so so you'll see that these are comparing one to the other. We had fewer applicants in this most recent quarter, which we would expect to see just based on the times of year that most boards and commissions terms end. And then of note, we had fewer people providing demographic data. And so it went down from 92% of applicants and appointees provided demographic data to now we're at 83%. So this is highlighted in green as a change. But really, I just wanted to call this out because I really appreciate that you all have lifted up the importance of providing this demographic information in the past, and really talking about the way in which we consider it when you discuss your appointments to the various boards and commissions. And as you can see, the work is never done. So there's always room to remind community that this information is valuable for us to use as we go forward with this type of work.
Commissioner Willie, you have a question?
Oh, sorry, I can't see anybody but you, Chair Harrington.
No, just a quick question. I'd like to have some baseline information. So prior to 2021, I don't know, back in the old days, 2018 and before, prior to basically this commission, with the exception of Roy, what was that demographic data? Did we even ask for it?
So yeah, we did. I'm sorry, am I cutting you off, or was there more to your?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay.
Nope.
Yeah, so we started asking this information in when we transitioned to our online application system, which was a little bit before my time in the CAO, but I think that began to happen around 2016, 2017. Our baseline shows that over the history of that, from the time where we started asking that question, with 13% of applicants and appointees provide that information. So we saw this major jump once you all started taking that information into consideration in the appointments and talking about the value of diversifying the participants in the boards and commissions and making an inclusive environment. Does that answer your question? I'm happy to share more data if you have other questions about it. Okay, next slide. So these are a breakdown of the year of birth and race and ethnicity. And so here we've compared Q1 appointees to Q2 appointees. I've highlighted in green what I think are some positive changes, not necessarily tied to a increase or decrease, those colors aren't, but changes that lead us further in our journey of realizing the county's commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion that was laid out in the resolution. So you can see some of the changes here, and let me just make this a little small. So you'll notice that for the year of birth, the no response has gone down quite a bit. So for Q1, we had 47.8% of appointees did not respond to that question, and in Q2, 23.5% did not respond. So that's great. We also increased our participation of people born in the 1940s. We also increased our participation, increased our participation in people born in the 1990s, which I think is also really great. And we saw some decreases in the other areas, and that's really helping us to level out to have a more representative sample that's reflective of our county demographics in terms of age breakdown. Then for the race and ethnicity, similarly, Q1 is compared to Q2, and these are of appointees. So we did have a bit of a decrease in people who did not respond to this question, and then greater representation across the race and ethnicity categories that we collect. We only collect one, we only allow people to provide one option. So the 2+ races, we don't know what that breakdown is in terms of specific race and ethnicity identification, but we know that we're increasing in every category. And so to me, that's very exciting, and in some areas getting much closer to representation across the county. So next slide. So transitioning to support that we continue to provide, as well as some of the new things that we're making available to CPO leaders and boards and commissions participants. Next slide. So at the top here is the administrative support that's specific to community participation organizations, or CPOs. So we are continuing to host virtual meetings to provide that support and then help with agenda development. One thing that I forgot to include in here, which is a pretty big piece of work, is our ongoing communication of CPO meetings. So we continue to post those meetings on the county calendar, on our own calendar, on our webpage, push them out through Nextdoor, and then of course our extensive CPO email and postal mailing list. So additionally, we've been providing more recently are some equity, diversity, and inclusion and facilitation training. And facilitation training is also done with an EDI focus to CPO leaders and boards and commissions, leaders and participants. So the last couple of months, we have offered the technology of participation training, which is really a facilitation training that's focused specifically for facilitating online meetings or virtual meetings. So really helpful, because it's a newer place for people to be finding themselves in terms of facilitation. And then within that training are practical applications that are rooted in equity, diversity, and inclusion, and different examples, and it's a pretty great training. And then we've also made available Race Forward trainings. This is a 2-part series. So the first part is foundational building racial equity, and then the second phase is organizing racial equity, shifting power, and we have made that available to boards and commissions participants, CPO leaders, and then also some key staff as well. So the third thing that we're working on, and thanks to the land use and transportation staff, and then of course big thanks to to Brianna Jackson, our county's Learning and Development Program Manager. We were able to pilot or test out an operating agreement training that she did with the Planning Commission. And this is really one of the first steps in our work to roll out training to raise awareness, help volunteers and staff familiarize with the county's discrimination policy. And eventually we will roll this into a more comprehensive onboarding plan for volunteers who participate with the county in this capacity, these types of leadership activities, like boards and commissions and community participation organizations. And I hope to be able to share more of that progress in the future quarterly update, especially as the Equity Leadership Council committees focused in these areas like training and boards and commissions best practices really get rolling with their respective work plans. Next slide, please. So specific to CPOs, this slide shows attendance over the past 3 years. And you can see, let me just make this bigger. So each color represents a different year. Yellow, or that golden yellow color, is 2021. So that's why it's flatlined at July, because that's the future and we don't know what the future holds. And then the gray line is 2020. So you'll see there was definitely a dip when the pandemic first hit and we closed things down. Orange is 2019, and then blue is 2018. So what you can somewhat notice, I think, from this is that CPO attendance tends to start off strong in the beginning of the calendar year. There's a lull in summer. Lots of CPOs take a break during summer, and then it picks up a bit in the fall. And that's usually in relation to candidate forums or measures that might be on the ballot that people are learning about. And then again, drops off in the winter holiday time. And then just for a comparison, this slide is on the same scale as the slide 11, which is the touch points that people may have to engage with you all. So if you look at slide 11, you can see that the Board of Commissioner events, engagement events, tend to have about 200 plus or minus participants, and this and CPOs are closer to a little less than 150, just for a comparison. Next slide. So transitioning to the Civic Leaders Program, which is one of our many pathways for participation. Next slide. We're in a transition phase with this program, so we're in the process of preparing an RFP for our next community-based partner or partners to administer this program. So Adelante Mujeres has been a terrific partner and provider for this program for the last 5 years, and we really appreciate all that they have done to help this program grow. We're especially thankful for the data that they have helped us to collect in evaluating this program, and that data and other input from community civic leader alumni is what we're using to help us shape this new direction that we'll be looking to go in. And so we're still working that out, and hopefully I'll have more details on that when I come to you in Q3. We are continuing our ongoing engagement with alumni, though, in this transition. There are 100 civic leader alumni, many of which serve on boards and commissions currently and participate in other ways in the county. And so we just really appreciate the time that they take to share their ideas and opinions with us, and that they provide their leadership in the county in that capacity. Next slide. So another one of the efforts of our team is engaged in is culturally specific relationship building. Next slide. Next slide, please. So one of our newest pieces of work in this regard is the supportive housing services. And so you heard from program staff recently. Ty Schwafferman was here with Jess Larson sharing with you some of the pieces of supportive housing services program. So I won't go into much detail there, but I did want to highlight a couple of things in which we are particularly proud. So we continue to be committed to building trust and partnership support and learning lots of lessons around shelter, new shelters in the county. And so we're working with housing and facilities and on an equity mapping so that we'll be better prepared when those sites are available going into the future, have a better idea of community makeup surrounding those sites and help us really with our engagement. And then of course, language accessibility and partnering with community partners like Hillsborough Latino Business Advisory Council and others who are very connected to this work. So some of the other things that have been going on in supportive housing, recruiting new supportive housing services providers that are culturally specific through this request for programmatic qualifications process. So that's new services for community members that are houseless right now that can have a culturally specific option if they desire that. And so we're engaging a very diverse group of professionals with lived experience to improve the intake process through the Community Connect modernization as well. And so that's including components around language access, race, ethnicity, and the ability to request culturally specific service providers. And then we have some new diverse shelter operators in Washington for the first time in Washington County. And so we're very excited about some of those collaborations as well. Next slide. So community engagement staff are continuing to be points of contact for culturally specific communities and really focusing on the relationship building. One example of that are the Cultural Heritage Month acknowledgements. And so these Cultural Heritage Months are opportunities for us to identify and connect with community partners and really grow those relationships. But we're also using them as a tool for deeper engagement and policy change. Some examples of that are, for example, Black History Month. It serves as an opportunity to strengthen relationships with community partners. And then it really helped us as an organization to center Black staff voices in things like Juneteenth and Reimagine and move, really start to have those conversations about what that looks like for the organization. Another example is the Native American Heritage Month celebration of 2020. So last fall really led us to develop and strengthen relationships with Native and Indigenous partners. And that has transitioned and allowed us to look to those partners when we started talking about land acknowledgement to make sure that we're being really authentic and thoughtful about that process. And you had a chance to hear from them last week. So you know firsthand that in this regard, community is asking us to be more comprehensive about what we're doing, that we're not just celebrating or acknowledging, but that we're really working to build partnerships going forward and do, collaborate with community and support community and in a different way than we have in the past. So we look to these opportunities as ways to further those relationships and gain ideas on how we as an organization can authentically demonstrate our commitment to honoring the diversity in our county. Let's see, and next slide, please. So we have some projects that we're continuing to work on, the Community Engagement Staff Network. So most recently, this group served to develop and implement an equity, diversity, and inclusion-based community engagement spectrum. And so that really helps us to have shared practice across the organization and how to think about and plan for community engagement. And this spectrum helps illustrate where we might be in a decision-making process so that we can make sure to manage expectations with the community and really and engage them appropriately for what we're asking of them. And then digital engagement tools, we're still assessing this. There are a lot of potential tools and that we continue to look at, and our needs continue to shift. So it's a little bit of a moving target as we go forward. And we are just considering a lot of the different options, and then of course working with IT on what would be feasible for the county. Next slide. So the last area of focus for me to share with you today is our department support. And these are just a couple examples of the work that we're doing with departments to inform processes around equity, diversity, and inclusion considerations and equitable community engagement. So for example, Land Use and Transportation, working with them on the community engagement portion of the Major Streets Transportation Improvement Plan, and then also working with them on Planning Commission inclusivity. housing. In addition to the work that Ty is doing with supportive housing services, we're also working on equity considerations for encampments and shelters. And then another example is with supportive services. We are deeply involved in the community engagement processes around the website redesign and all the facets of that, working with the web redesign team in the community to really try to be as comprehensive as we can around that. It's a new, it's a new area for the county. So pretty excited to have that opportunity, take those opportunities to community and hear from them. And that is community engagement Q2 in a nutshell. So back to you, Latricia, unless there are questions that I can answer.
Okay,
Tricia, do you want questions now or later?
Later is fine. And yeah, so, and I think you can see why I am just extremely proud of the work of the community engagement team. Their range is both deep and wide in terms of the work they're advancing for the county. And in addition to the great work of that team, we have also engaged in a range of foundational activities over the past quarter focused on equity. So go to the next slide. So again, centering on the equity resolution over the past quarter with new staff joining, we've launched the committees of the Equity Leadership Council and had our second Equity Leadership Council meeting. So as a reminder, the Equity Leadership Council meets quarterly and the Equity Leadership Council committees meet monthly. So the committees launched in April, some in early May. And so they've only met 3 or 4 times at this point. And their focus is really on the forming and norming. So they focused on getting clarity around their charters, more of a modified decision-making process, which is centering consensus building as opposed to like a majority vote. They're also developing out their operating agreements and their operating norms. So all really creating the container for clarity of their focus, but also relationships, building the foundations of their relationships. One of the things that we're learning is that this and our Cultural Heritage Month celebrations are just a few examples of how employees are being invited to engage cross-county, so cross-departmentally with a focus on equity, inclusion, and community engagement. So this is also part of that change, the organizational change and organizational culture change that I spoke to earlier on. We are also, as Amanda mentioned about the trainings, we're also working with the Equity Leadership Council and committee members to provide them with support to be able to access the online trainings, also from Race Forward, focused on building a clear understanding of key concepts of racial equity and structural racism, and developing tools and their analysis to effectively shift power toward racial justice within our departments and our policies. Next slide. All right, and then again, some activities that we've been working on in collaboration with the amazing government relations team. This was the initial legislative session where we've been explicitly tracking legislation that has an equity focus, and then also beginning to talk about how to build equity in our budget process. And again, you'll hear more from me in August, a little forecasting around how we invest our discretionary dollars within the community network, as an example, centering equity in that budgeting process. So those are really key cornerstones of equity and policy, thinking about both legislation or public policy, but also budget as policy. In terms of the COVID response, we have been working in partnership with the amazing folks in the public health team of Health and Human Services to make sure that equity has been and continues to be lifted up as part of our COVID response. And then our staff has partnered also with public health in facilitating and convening a COVID racial equity work group. And we're really looking at how can we engage that COVID racial equity work group as we pivot, ideally, from response to recovery in terms of how do we build equity into the ARPA funding opportunity that's before the board. Next slide. As I mentioned before, we are continuing to finalize an assessment of how Washington County handles both Title VI and Title VII civil rights complaint processes. So Title VI is focused on client civil rights, and Title VII is focused on preventing discrimination and harassment among our employees and volunteers and contractors. And so we're looking at how are we implementing already established policy within Washington County, and how looking for opportunities to improve in our procedure for handling and resolving those complaints, as well as looking for opportunities to prevent discrimination and harassment across our organization. We've also been working with the good people in the facilities department who have really been focusing on the Americans with Disabilities Act compliance in terms of facilities, and they have contracted with an organization out of Washington State who's doing a larger assessment around opportunities to improve our compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, both in terms of facilities, as well as how we engage with clients and remove barriers for clients, and how we engage with our employees. And then we continue to staff a limited English assistance policy work group who has representation from each department focused on how we implement limited English assistance procedures. And we'll be able to share more about that as an update to the board in November, which will be the 1-year anniversary of your adoption of the limited English assistance policy. Next slide, please. So the wonderful thing about bringing on additional staff capacity is we can actually share some additional data relative to the work that we're doing around procurement equity. And so Ms. Kong, who is the supplier diversity coordinator, did a deep data dive into our procurement system to give us a sense of baseline of where we're starting from in terms of our engagement with COVID certified firms. So these are firms that have been certified by the state of Oregon, and they're either minority-owned firms, women-owned firms, emerging small businesses, veteran-owned firms, et cetera. And so currently, we are seeing less than 1% of our contracts going to COVID certified firms, and less than 1% of our contracted dollar amount going to COVID certified firms, and about 3% of the current spend going to COVID certified firms. And while the numbers are shocking, I think if it's new information to you, it's not out of alignment with what many other government jurisdictions are seeing. This is a challenge. There are many barriers, and we're really pleased that Ms. Kong is here working as she is to address some of those barriers and engage in partnership with entities that we think can help us move the dial. So next slide. So these are some of the activities. Again, you heard from me and Susie Fulcher and Jack Leung around some of the updates to our procurement policies several weeks ago. And then you also heard from our partners at Metro around Construction Career Pathway Project, which is also referred to as C2P2. And then Ms. Kong is engaging with local trade associations and minority business organizations, and we're looking at how we can engage both as Washington County and specifically in our ARPA work with these organizations to help with the economic recovery efforts as well. So we're promoting with them how to register for our Procure Now portal, and then also sharing out solicitations and upcoming projects to potential suppliers. Next slide. We are also partnering or supporting, providing staff support in partnership with the Hillsborough Chamber of Commerce for their DEI symposium planning, and I'm very excited about the possibility of being a sponsor for that symposium, which we're considering. We're also serving as a resource for several internal departmental stakeholders by supporting departments and thinking about how to apply equity to their procurements, and then building relationships with the COVID office to strategize on how to increase diverse participation of our contractor base. And starting to build an infrastructure of the equity, of an equity culture within the Equity Leadership Council Committee focused on employee and supplier diversity and inclusion best practices. Next slide. I talked a little bit already about the training, and Amanda shared a little bit about that as well, and also our appreciation for Ms. Brianna Jackson, our learning and development manager. So and Ashley Horn, who has joined with us, has a really strong depth of experience of providing equity training. So we're excited about what we will be able to share out with you in the coming quarterly reports. And the last slide, as I mentioned before, we are currently working on engaging with community partners to co-create the structure for the Advisory Council on Racial Equity, and then we are hoping to bring them into conversation with us in August with a November launch for the actual Advisory Council. And the next slide actually concludes the presentation, and we're happy to take any questions you might have.
Wonderful, Latricia and Amanda. Commissioners, questions or comments? Who would like to start? Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
I'd just like to say I think I'm tired listening to this. It's a lot of work, and I really have a tremendous amount of respect for the amount of work that's gone on. I think the most shocking slide was the COVID slide, and I appreciate the perspective that you provided in understanding where we are in relationship to others of our same type, so to speak. And that's helpful. It doesn't mean we don't have a lot of work to do, but it is helpful. So thank you for this. And it's hard to believe that this is your third presentation in less than a year, correct? I mean, this is, yeah. So thank you for the work that's gone on. I'm wondering if there's a way that we could almost get a smaller, more condensed version so that when I'm out and about, when I'm talking to others, is there a way to kind of hit some highlights? I don't want to minimize the work that's gone on in this program, but I also want to be able to have at my fingertips a way to really communicate quickly and succinctly what's been going on, because it's a large amount of work, and it really stands to reflect the commitment that we as a commission made early on. So thank you. And would you consider that type of fact sheet, quick sheet, whatever you might call it?
Absolutely. We meet regularly with Philip Bransford and his wonderful team. And we've been talking about a communications strategic plan for the office. And I think this is an action item we can move forward with really quickly.
Anyone else?
Jerry's moving quick. So Commissioner Willie, do you want to go first? Yeah.
Go ahead, Roy.
Yeah, I'll be somewhat redundant on comments I've made earlier. I get confused when we talk about involvement in MISTIP and other programs in one of your slides. I've seen a lot of expectations gap between what we can do. I mean, you have 5 people you're talking to who are elected by their constituents to make certain decisions with the input and hopeful a lot of input from those residents. I think there needs to be more definition of what involvement means, because I have witnessed that some people take that as I have the ability to make changes and to make directions. And I would respectfully say to them and others that the only ones who can do that is 3 of the 5 here on any given day. So that part I think needs some details on. Equity continues to be a struggle for me in terms of definition, and people all have their own definition. Words are powerful. Equity in the budget process, I don't know what that means. We saw lots of people say, well, that didn't meet my benchmark. So I continue to ask, and my 4 colleagues may have a perfectly thought out definition, but I don't know what that really means. And it's hard to represent that we have achieved that or not achieved that, or that we're making strides on that if I don't really understand it myself, and because people have different definitions. So that's a couple of items. In regard to the COVID 2.93% currently, I guess I'm not terribly surprised, disappointing, but not terribly surprised. I was hopeful that those numbers might change a bit. One thing that's you always think of is that it's minority based, but it's also women based as well. And it's pretty shocking when you understand the number of women who own businesses or involved to have that sort of a low number. And so I'm not sure that we're tracking right. I don't take anything away from all you've done. You've probably done great work, but if it's majority owned, I guess maybe that would be one definition, or significantly owned. I think in a lot of businesses are particularly husband and wife. Maybe the husband might have 51%, but about 20% of the say, honestly, when it comes to some things. And I'm not being disparaging; it's just a reality. So I'd like to see those numbers as a goal about triple as a goal. And I didn't see any aspirational goals in there. So that's the only comments I have. Commissioner Willie.
Thank you, Roy. I am looking at, I don't see a slide number on it. Okay, so I'm looking at kind of your recap, Latricia, on your team equity and inclusion. And just wondering, have you filled now the team that we had anticipated to be done? Do you still have a couple of spots left? And which ones are they? I know that I just met your newest addition, Sean, yesterday.
Yes.
So that was
On this
great.
first day.
Right. So what's the other positions we've got open there?
So the last one that you budgeted for is the equity data analyst, and we have gone out for recruitment on that one 2 times. We have not been successful both times. I suspected that this would be the hardest position to fill, in part because many other jurisdictions are also going out for similar types of positions, and the market is very competitive. And it's a brand new position for Washington County. So it could be in the ways that we're messaging about it, or it could just be that the charge is, it's a very innovative position in its early days. So you kind of have to get that innovator, data analyst, systems person, so we're asking for a lot. So we're starting to think about potentially thinking about some other approaches, like potentially contracting with some partners to look at our data systems, to look at how we collect race, ethnicity data, how we analyze that data, to maybe move us into a different position organizationally, which then may set us up for a more successful recruitment. So those are some of the things we're considering. And then as a result,
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, you and I early on talked that was going to be the first position that you filled. So yeah, it must be difficult to find that, because I know that you've wanted to fill that position early, and it's unfortunate we haven't been able to do that. I think that's going to, again, you and I talked about the importance of that information helping drive a number of other things going. So yeah, I'll be happy when that one's filled.
Absolutely. And then we, as a result of our partnership with Supportive Housing Services and the Housing Department, we were allocated a Senior Housing Justice Coordinator position that we're in the final stages of hiring. So, I'm always hopeful that by the next quarter, we'll have a full team ready, onboarded, and be able to introduce them to you.
Well, I especially appreciate this report. Like Commissioner Treese said, you almost get tired going through this, because there's so much detail and so much activity, but you've done a great job keeping all the marbles on the table. So thank you again for this report. We look forward to the next one, and certainly all the work that you get done. And I've said this before, but I especially appreciate the one-on-one time that you give me when I ask, and kind of walking me through some uncharted territories, certainly for me. And you're always very patient and very helpful. So I appreciate your time, and certainly your team's doing a great job. So thanks for this.
Thank you. And I appreciate your engagement, and I'm happy to provide any kind of one-on-one conversation time with any of the commissioners as well.
Commissioner Fye, did you have anything before I go?
I'll just say I'm very impressed of all the things you were able to accomplish in the short amount of time you've been here, Latricia. Congratulations to Tanya and the team, and Latricia. I'm very impressed. So I'm very grateful for all this. Thank you.
I agree. We do have a great team, and we're really blessed that we have such a great team to take us on this journey. So I have a couple of questions, and I'm going to just go in reverse order of the presentation. So on the equity, diversity, and inclusion structure, where you talk about the External Advisory Council for Racial Equity, slide 33. Could you describe for us, bringing to life a little bit about what co-creation involves? Because the past pattern was, we want to have an external, a board and commission. We put together a definition of what their responsibilities and work will be, maybe even draft up some bylaws to help give them some direction to get started and what kind of positions we want, adopt that by resolution, and then go forward with soliciting applications. That's not what this is about. So could you describe a little bit about what this involves?
Sure. So, co-creation really recognizes that there's both expertise on establishing these kinds of bodies and structures within Washington County, and also a lot of expertise that exists within the community as well. And so thinking about things like what is the structure? What's the cadence of these meetings? Are they what's the decision-making process? And I think because community leaders have participated in numerous of these bodies, they have a really strong sense of what works and what might be barriers to authentic participation and engagement with our Washington County elected leaders. And they also see it as a huge opportunity, and many of them have advocated for this leading up to the adoption of the equity resolution. And so we want to honor and acknowledge that wisdom and knowledge that exists within the community and leverage that to create this structure together. And I think it really just sets the tone from before the beginning, right? That we're doing this in partnership with community. We're not setting the table and saying, okay, come to this structure that we've already decided how it's going to work and function. We want to build that together.
And I'm really looking forward to that being done. I'm looking for that outcome. I remember when we went through the community forums in January of 2020 with staff's help and community partners' help, right? To get some feedback about what the proposed equity resolution was, and, just making sure we gave them some kind of basis to start. But please give us your thoughts. Because we're all in this together. So thank you. I want to echo Commissioner Treece's request. There is a tremendous amount of activity going on. I sometimes got a little unclear with the activity report of what sort of timeframes or plans you were leading up to. Some of them you foreshadowed, in this timeframe in August and in November, and I found that really helpful. Thank you. But I appreciated all that you said, because it helped me better understand of, wow, we're trying to get full liftoff with our first generation of this work here as a county, and this is what it takes. So they're really good.
I would just add that I've been hesitant to develop a plan in isolation from a team that didn't exist yet.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now that we're so close to having a full equity team and a full community engagement team, we're really looking forward to doing some team building and then some strategic planning. But we are really building from the ground up. So a lot of the work, it does feel like, when you do a groundbreaking and you wonder when the building's coming, and that takes time. So
Yep. So going backwards now, I'm on slide 24, which is about team community engagement and departmental support. And I just want to put a plug in here. The community engagement team helps us with our quarterly town halls, our board town halls. Don't forget that, because we keep trying something different every time, and different topics and slightly different setup. It's been really great to have the consistency of Zoom and YouTube, the American Sign Language or ASL, as well as the Spanish language interpretation. So, let's just keep going. So I look forward to hearing your ideas of what we might consider doing differently in the future. But I really appreciate how there have been follow-up reports, and as people have posted questions that we've either needed follow-up on or we haven't even been able to get into, that the team follows up with that. So give yourself some credit as a Board of Commissioners. You support us too. Slide 23. You shared with us that there's a community engagement spectrum, and I would just appreciate it if you could share what that is with us for the purposes of making sure we know what the definition is and that we are able to speak the language, that vocabulary. That's all. So just a lot of tremendous work that I really appreciate. I know that for some of the CPO members and CCI members that there have been, from their perspective, some changes for adjustment. I think you've done a good job of trying to make sure that we're broadening our reach and doing so in a context-sensitive manner that serves our entire community. And as I say that, our entire community, here we are in July. I'm so anxious to get the census information, which is a snapshot of what our community is or was back in 2020. So I'm ready to dig in and learn more. So thank you very much. I'm really grateful for the department that you're leading, Ms. Tillman, and for all the work that you and your leads are doing for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any last comments or suggestions before we move on? Okay. Well, you don't get to go away, do you? Here we are. It's now time for the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Strategic Action Plan. So let's get to it. Boom, boom, take it away.
Okay, and I think we have a new set of, maybe a new document that we can all take a look at, if we can pull that up.
Latricia, we did not receive any additional documents for this presentation.
Oh, okay, so it would be in the packet then, as an attachment.
Yes, what she's asking for is to display page 122 of 128 in the packet.
Give us just a moment.
So as that's coming up, I can just provide a little bit of context. So again, going back to the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Resolution, there were certain directives that were given to me, that you all adopted. So one was obviously hire a chief equity officer. That's the role I'm playing. Establish the Equity Leadership Council. We gave an update on that. Convene the Advisory Council on Racial Equity. That's happening. And then bring on the new positions. And then another directive within the resolution was to establish an equity strategic plan. So in the document that is coming forward, what I wanted to share was that given the equity strategic plan was due to the board by August of 2021. So due to the need to hire a team and establish these other bodies, the proposal that I was asked in my last quarterly report, which you all asked me to come back here for discussion, was in lieu of an equity strategic plan to adopt this equity strategic action plan. And that's because Washington County is having conversations now about its own countywide strategic plan, which would include equity, diversity, and inclusion as pillars of the Washington County strategic plan. So instead of having parallel planning processes, or rushed planning processes or planning processes in advance of having a team of thinkers and subject matter experts. I put together a draft strategic action plan, which would help to outline the main activities of this year as we get ready for the Washington County strategic plan. So all of that context is on page 1 and 2 of that memo. And then on the subsequent pages are the major activities that are included within that proposed strategic action plan. And so I'm bringing that back to you. It was shared with you directly in email. It was shared in a high-level overview in the last quarterly meeting. And so today I just wanted to refresh the purpose of that strategic action plan and then open up time for any questions you might have about that strategic action plan, so that that can be the interim step that the board takes to adopt in advance of the Washington County strategic plan, and then a more community-informed equity strategic plan for the county.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Ms. Tillman on what she has recommended? So I think Commissioner Tree said no. Commissioner Faiz said no. Commissioner Willie, go ahead.
Yeah, it's certainly not a question. I guess, I don't know, it's because my left brain thinking process, I really appreciated the last 2 pages of that. Maybe the last 3 pages where you've got your graph, you've got your program laid out, green and the asterisks and those kinds of things. To me, that was, it kind of gave me 2 messages. One is that you've been able to take this and put it into a format where you can track this, so we can look, and it's almost like we're going through and checking some boxes and saying, okay, we said we were going to do this and now we're doing this. A timeline of how we're going to go about doing this. You've got it as meetings and reports and deliverables. So just a lot of really good information in there. So again, I appreciated that as much as your couple pages of memo there. So thanks for putting all that together for me in a visual fashion.
Commissioner Rogers, did you have anything?
No, thank you.
Okay, I just have 3 clarifying questions. On page 1, in the section with the 2 check marks and then the convening the community-led advisory council, on the second check mark, impanel a staff leadership equity council. Yep, you've done that. But of the latter part, it says, and the creation of employee affinity groups. So will employee affinity groups be something done in the future? Because you've put a check which says done, but I haven't heard anything about employee affinity groups being put in place. So what don't I understand?
Yeah. The check mark refers to the first verb. So impaneling a staff leadership equity council, and then what's under their scope includes the establishment of employee affinity groups. And that is one of the pieces of work of the committee focused on employee and supplier diversity and inclusion best practices. So that's on their work plan. They have not completed recommendation that could come before the board at this point. So the work isn't done. You'll see that actually reflected down below in the timeline. But the body, right, the work to create that body has happened.
Okay, so I'll just say that I don't want it to take another 3 years, right, to get employee affinity groups going. I just pulled that number out of the air. I just, I want to see it get done. That's all. But like you said, in a genuine and meaningful way. So, okay. The two clarifying questions are on the latter two charts. I just want to make sure that I have understood this correctly. And it's on, so under data equity, the third bullet, you have boards and commissions demographics reporting. So that continues for a couple more quarters. And then under board and commissions diversity and inclusion, there's the last bullet, boards and commissions annual update. So my question is, so will the demographic reporting move to, instead of being quarterly, then just move to be part of the annual report?
Yes.
Okay, so I understood that correctly. Thank you. Like I said, just clarifying questions. And then on the next chart, on the next page, civic leadership training RFP, and then civic leadership training implementation. So really my clarifying question here is, on that RFP, are you putting anything out that is asking for a further evolution, or is the RFP written such that you just want to continue a good program?
So I believe we are maybe slightly behind on this one. The RFP has not yet been written. And I think at this point, the evolution of the Civic Leaders Program will be, as Amanda referenced, that there may be more than one organization that can deliver the Civic Leaders Program. And so there is an opportunity to take the evaluation that has been happening with the program Adelante Mujeres has been running and implement those learnings into the evolution of the program, either through one provider or multiple community providers.
Okay, so I'm not asking for anything specifically. I'm not trying to get involved with the contents of the RFP. I would just like to have the opportunity to see it when it goes out and to see what it was when we originally did the RFP, to see how we're advancing, potentially advancing the program. That's all. It's just for my own awareness of how the program's evolving.
Absolutely. Happy to.
Yeah. So I'm just absolutely thrilled that you're on board. I think coming up with the strategic action plan was a really good step towards supporting you and your team in helping us be on the journey as an organization. And I'm just wondering, logistically, given that we took board action with that resolution, Ms. Angie, do we need to adopt this action plan as a milestone to formalize that? You know, when I put an external hat on, or think like an independently elected auditor, you know, did they do what they said they were going to do? And it's perfectly fine to pivot given certain needs, but without memorializing it through a resolution, you know, then it just becomes somewhat of hard to connect those dots. So what do you think?
My recommendation would be that the board formally adopt this in an upcoming board meeting, as then it does memorialize it and ensure that it's transparency and follow up to the resolution and next steps that Washington County is taking on this journey.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
And I assume that means not on the consent agenda. I'm recommending that it not be on the consent agenda.
It can be on as an action item with a very brief staff report.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Great. All righty. Terrific. Any other questions or thoughts, commissioners? Nope. Job well done, Ms. Tillman. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're coming down to the home stretch here, folks. Just one more short item, and that's the CWAC recruitment briefing. And it looks like we have Ms. Diane Taniguchi to help us out. Take it away. Oops, you're on mute. There's Mark.
There's Mark. Yeah, Mark
There
Johnson wants to be able to provide the briefing to the board. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much, Diane and Chair Harrington, members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm bringing an issue to you that I've talked about briefly before. The 15-member Clean Water Services Advisory Commission is appointed by the Board of Directors to review and discuss and make recommendations to you all on major policy issues and programs. And the Advisory Commission is composed of 13 voting members and 2 non-voting members that are appointed by the board to represent a broad base of stakeholders. The 2 non-voting members are actually a Clean Water Services representative, which is Diane, and a city representative, which is Sherilyn Lambos, who's the city manager of the city of Tualatin. The balance of the people are appointed to represent this broad base of stakeholder interests. You see that in your packet there. And each CWAC term is 4 years, and approximately a quarter of the terms expire each year. This year, the 4 terms that will be expiring in September of 2021 is the at-large representative, which is currently held by Art Lawrence, who was first appointed to the commission in 2012. The District 2 representative in Commissioner Teresa's district, which is held by Molly Brown. And Molly was originally first appointed in 2007 and has been a long-term member of our budget committee as well. The agricultural rep position, which is currently held by John Jackson, and he was first appointed in 2013. And then also one of the builder developer reps, which is currently held by Matt Wellner. I believe you know him because he also used to serve on the budget planning commission, if I'm not mistaken. And he was first appointed in 2016. What I'm coming to the board today to do is to inform you that those positions are there and to begin recruitment for those 4 positions with the idea that we would bring a slate of candidates back to you in mid to late September with a scheduled appointment in early October to assume those new positions. We will work closely. I really appreciated Latricia and Amanda's presentation today. I think that will be a tremendous resource for us as we also work with them to look. I really want to look at the Civic Leaders Program that the county's operated for a number of years now to look if there's candidates there that we can reach out to. We've already had some people that have already reached out to us about when this will be opening. But that is my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
I thought, so it sounds like what you're just looking for is to inform us, but it says here, provide direction on the process.
Yes, that's right. It's really to inform you, and if there's any specific things that you would like us to do in terms of that recruitment, or any specific people that you or groups that you would like us to reach out to, I would welcome that input. You have those connections, and they're your appointments.
So for myself, I'm going to be looking for someone who is interested in looking at the climate challenges that we face as a community, particularly with regard to clean water services as a watery recovery expert, as well as surface water. So that factors in. I also took this list and tried to put together in my own head, looking at the term expires, from first appointed to appointed, and just looking ahead for every single person, it looks like we have 3 sets of folks that if we appointed them beyond their current term, they'd be coming back for a 4th term, which sort of tells me something. And I appreciate that we have some folks who've served for 1 term so far, some for 2, and some that are completing their 3rd. But I really start to wonder when we've had folks beyond a 3rd term, are we pulling in enough folks to help us on behalf of the community? But I certainly appreciate that all that Tony Weller has brought to the table over the years. But when I'm looking at dates from 07 and 08, I'm like, gee, we need to start building some resiliency there in terms of our membership. So I just had that on the brain. I understand that his position isn't up yet. Matt Wellner's is. And if I understand it right, it looks like Matt may have come in the middle of a term. So thus far, he's really only had 1.5 terms. And I know having that builder developer membership is really important. John Jackson, I'll have to say, in terms of my only handful, not even a full hand, of meetings for CWAC that I've been in, I have no recollection of him. So I'll have to work on that a little bit. So that's for me to get more organized about. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you, Chair. I will say we have similar thoughts in terms of building resiliency for that organization and new blood and depth and stuff. I think we did a good job earlier this year with some of the recruitment. I will say that John Jackson intends to step down. I believe that Molly Brown also is very happy to support us and do these things, but I think has an intention to step down. And I think that it's similar with Art Lawrence. I believe that Matt Wellner will be reapplying. So there's that opportunity for that resiliency, certainly. And we will look for that and use that as a criteria as we look at recruitment.
And I realize that you've had the opportunity to hear, but my colleagues haven't to date. Well, no, I'm just reminding myself. When back in 2019, we had the participants from Metro's master recycler program that they had partnered on with Centro Cultural. And it was specifically handled through a Spanish speaking oriented program. And I mentioned that if there were some members from that cohort that wanted to seek a CWAC appointment, that I would actively move forward with that as part of the at-large appointment. So I know you and I have talked about that and touching bases back there, back to that set. So I just wanted to share that with my colleagues because I'd forgotten to a minute ago. That's it for me. Commissioners, is there any other direction that you want to provide to our Clean Water Services staff as they go to open up this recruitment and seek applications for us to consider?
Can I say something, Chair?
Yes, please.
I was a member of CWAC, so I'm really a fan of CWAC, and I know the great work Mark has done, because I actually was on the phone about my own recruitment, so reflecting, and I think you do a great job, and I would recommend like Adelante La Mujeres utilizing that group, and also us commissioners to get the word out of some of these recruitments. I got nervous when I heard Tony because I know the great work of facilitation that Tony does for the meeting, and the wealth of information and the knowledge he has of, clean water services and irrigation and just everything about land use and everything about public. So, and Matt as well. And so I think you have your work cut out, and I'm happy to support to get the word out if you need any recruitment. And I think also, to just beef up on the DEI efforts to connect with Latricia and just, mooch off some of that connection and expertise that she really has. And I'm happy to support, but I think you'll do a great job of recruiting anyone for this, because CWAC feeds you, as well as tackle big. Every time I left that meeting, I felt 55% smarter than I come in. So it's pretty good group. Thank you for all you do, Diane and Mom.
We need to check in with Apano as well. They have. Yeah.
I was just gonna mention Apano, and I'd like to check in with the Muslim Educational Trust too. So there's all sorts of CBOs that we need to reach out to, but as far as District 2 goes, those are a couple that I would like to make sure we reach out to.
And if you want, and we all 5 of us have relationships with HBA with regard to the builder developer, but I know you're engaged with them too, so let us know. All righty. Anything else, commissioners? Nope, I think that's it then.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All righty, so that's it for our work session topics. Has anything else come up that we need to check on? Nope. Seeing none, then we'll adjourn the work session and we'll see one another back on Zoom at 6:30 p.m. Okay. Thanks, everybody. See you later.